racist rich man humiliates a black waiter in front of old woman, unaware of who she really is. Marcus wiped the sweat from his brow as he maneuvered through the bustling dining room of Rive Gauche, the upscale restaurant that had quickly become the crown jewel of the city's culinary scene. It was a Friday night, and the place was packed, the air thick with the mingled aromas of garlic and roasting meats. He'd worked at Rive Gauche for 3 years, and on nights like this, he often felt like he was part of a well-oiled machine, each staff member performing their role with precision. "2 more at table 6, a voice called from the kitchen, slicing through the din of conversation and clinking silverware. It was Carla, the head chef, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, eyes focused intently on the plates being sent out. Marcus nodded and moved with purpose, weaving through the throng of patrons. He placed the freshly plated entrees on a tray, the weight of the dishes grounding him in the chaos. "Tonight's a big one," he muttered to himself, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline that came with the dinner service. As he approached the high-backed booths, he noticed a familiar group seated at the corner table. Gerald. Gerald was a local businessman with a reputation that preceded him. He was known for his wealth, his arrogance, and his blatant disregard for anyone he deemed beneath him. Marcus had encountered Gerald before, and he had no doubt that the man would be the trouble tonight. "Hey, Marcus!" Gerald called out, his voice dripping with condescension. "You got a minute?" Marcus steeled himself as he approached the table. "What can I get for you, sir?" "This isn't a fast food joint, is it? I ordered the filet mignon, medium rare, not whatever this is." Gerald gestured dramatically at the plate in front of him, a look of exaggerated disgust on his face. The steak was perfect, as was the presentation, but Marcus knew better than to argue. Instead, he forced a smile. "I'll have it fixed for you right away." "You better. I don't have all night, and I hate waiting." Gerald leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, as if he owned the entire establishment. His friends chuckled, adding to Marcus's sense of humiliation, but he turned on his heel before they could see the flush creeping up his neck. As he returned to the kitchen, Marcus felt the weight of his dreams pressing down on him. He was here to save money for culinary school, to prove to himself in the world that he was more than just a waiter. He could hear Carla barking orders as the kitchen hummed around him, and he focused his energy on getting Gerald's meal right. "Marcus," Carla's voice cut through his thoughts, "we're running low on the duck confit. Can you take care of that?" "On it," Marcus replied, diving into the fray of food prep, channeling his frustration into his work. He had always admired Carla for her leadership and talent, and he wanted to impress her. But his mind kept drifting back to Gerald and the demeaning way he had spoken to him. The more he thought about it, the more his stomach churned. After a few minutes, he had the replacement dish ready and returned to Gerald's table, careful to maintain a polite demeanor. "Here you go, sir. A fresh filet mignon, cooked to your request." Gerald inspected the plate with a scrutinizing eye, and for a moment Marcus held his breath. The tension hung in the air as Gerald cut into the steak, juices oozing out, the scent of perfectly cooked meat mingling with the aroma of the restaurant. "Finally, something decent," Gerald said, giving a half-hearted nod. His friends laughed again, and Marcus felt his blood boil. "Is there anything else I can get for you?" he asked, forcing a smile, desperate to keep the peace. Gerald leaned in, his voice lowering conspiratorially. "Maybe you could try not to mess it up next time." He leaned back, crossing his arms with a triumphant smirk on his face. "I'll do my best, sir," Marcus replied through gritted teeth. He turned to leave, but Gerald's voice stopped him. "Oh, and Marcus?" Marcus paused, turning slowly to face him again. "It's a shame you don't know how to dress properly for a job like this. I mean, really, those shoes? Are you trying to make a statement? Or do you just not care?" The laughter at the table erupted, and Marcus felt heat flood his cheeks. He could feel the old woman seated at the next table glancing over, her eyes narrowed in concern. "I'll keep that in mind, sir," he said, forcing himself to remain calm as he walked away. He retreated to the kitchen, feeling the sting of embarrassment burning in his chest. The laughter of Gerald and his friends echoed in his ears, a reminder of the privilege and entitlement that seemed to ooze from them. "You okay?" Carla asked as she passed him, her brows furrowing with concern. "Yeah, I'm fine," Marcus replied, though the words felt hollow. He pushed the feelings down, burying them beneath the urgency of the dinner rush. He focused on his duties, moving from table to table, continuing to serve and smile, but the tension in his gut refused to dissipate. Each time he returned to Gerald's table, he felt a mix of resentment and humiliation. As the night wore on, the restaurant continued to buzz with activity. Marcus's feet ached, but he pushed through, determined to make it to the end of his shift without incident. He delivered drinks, cleared empty plates, and refilled glasses, anything to keep his mind off the confrontation. Just as he was about to breathe a sigh of relief, he overheard Gerald making another comment. "I don't know how a place like this can hire someone who clearly doesn't belong here. It's embarrassing." Marcus's fists clenched at his sides. He felt the old woman at the next table watching him again, her gaze sympathetic yet powerful. He wanted to tell her it was fine, that he was used to it, but the truth was that he was tired of being treated as if he was invisible. Tired of the condescension that dripped from Gerald's words like poison. As he continued to serve, Marcus couldn't help but feel a swell of anger rising within him. The humiliation cut deeper than he expected, each moment a reminder of the systemic inequalities he faced daily. He returned to the kitchen, trying to shake off the weight of the evening. Carla was busy plating up dishes, her focus unwavering. "You're doing great out there, Marcus. Just keep your head up," she encouraged. But the words felt distant, like echoes in a vast cavern. "Thanks, Carla. Before he could finish, a crash echoed from the dining area, followed by a chorus of gasps. Marcus's heart raced as he rushed back into the dining room, fear knotting in his stomach. At table 6, Gerald had stood up, his chair toppling over as he waved his arms in frustration. "This is unacceptable. I demand to speak to the manager." Marcus's breath hitched in his throat as he approached the scene, dread pooling in his chest. Gerald's face was flushed, his eyes wild with indignation. The old woman at the adjacent table looked horrified, her hands clasped tightly together as she observed the chaos. "What seems to be the problem, sir?" Marcus asked, stepping forward, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "You've ruined my night, and I won't stand for it," Gerald spat, his gaze piercing through Marcus. "You think you can treat people like this and get away with it? You're nothing but a lowly waiter." The weight of Gerald's words hung heavily in the air, and Marcus felt the anger surge to the surface. It would be so easy to let it all out, to tell Gerald exactly what he thought of him, but the memories of his dreams and aspirations pulled at him. He couldn't afford to lose his job over a racist man's tantrum. "I'm sorry you feel that way, sir. Let me get the manager for you," Marcus said, his voice firm, but the tremor in his hands betrayed his resolve. He turned away, taking a deep breath to steady himself as he walked toward the manager's office, the laughter from Gerald's friends echoing in his ears. As he passed the old woman, she caught his eye and offered a small, reassuring nod. In that moment, he felt a flicker of strength, a reminder that he wasn't alone. But as he reached the manager's office, all he could think about was how easy it would be to give in to the anger and humiliation. The conflict raged within him, leaving him at a crossroads. He could either walk away from the confrontation or stand up for himself, even if it meant risking everything. Marcus paused outside the manager's office, his heart pounding. He could hear Gerald's voice rising in frustration just beyond the door. With each second that ticked by, the tension in the air thickened, and Marcus felt the weight of his decisions pressing down on him. He had always been the type to keep his head down, to let the insults roll off his back, but tonight felt different. Gerald's words echoed in his mine, a constant reminder of the disdain he faced every day. Taking a deep breath, Marcus knocked on the door and stepped inside. The manager, Tom, looked up from his desk, his brows furrowing. "What's going on, Marcus?" Tom asked, sensing the tension in Marcus's demeanor. "Gerald is causing a scene at table 6, Marcus replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "He's demanding to speak to you about his meal." Tom sighed, rubbing his temples. "Again? That man has a chip on his shoulder. I'll handle it." He stood up, smoothing his apron as he prepared to face the irate customer. "Wait," Marcus said, surprising himself with his own boldness. "I think he's crossed a line. He's been incredibly disrespectful, and I don't want to be treated that way anymore." Tom regarded Marcus for a moment, the weight of the situation settling heavily between them. "I understand, but you know how it is. He's a big donor for us. We can't afford to lose his business." Marcus clenched his fists at his sides, frustration bubbling to the surface. "But at what cost? My dignity? I'm tired of being treated like I'm less than human because of my job. Tom took a step back, taken aback by Marcus's passion. I get it, but you have to pick your battles. Maybe this is the battle I need to pick, Marcus said, his voice rising slightly. The resolve in his chest flared, fueled by the humiliation he had endured all evening. Tom opened his mouth to respond but paused, assessing the fire in Marcus's eyes. All right, let's handle this together, he finally said, his tone shifting. But keep your cool, I'll back you up. Marcus nodded, the weight of Tom's support giving him a newfound sense of strength. As they made their way back to the dining area, he felt a surge of determination. This was his moment to stand up, not just for himself, but for anyone who had ever faced the same kind of treatment. When they reached table 6, Gerald was still ranting, his face red and animated as he gestured wildly. Tom approached with an authoritative presence. Gerald, I apologize for the inconvenience. What seems to be the issue? Tom asked, his tone calm but firm. This waiter has no idea how to do his job, Gerald exclaimed, pointing a finger at Marcus. He ruined my meal and humiliated me in front of my guests. I understand you're upset, Tom replied, maintaining eye contact with Gerald. But I think it's important to remember that everyone here is doing their best. Marcus has been with us for a while, and I can assure you he's dedicated to providing excellent service. Gerald scoffed, clearly unwilling to back down. Dedicated? He's a joke. You shouldn't hire people who can't handle basic tasks. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the heat of anger mixing with the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. Sir, I made a mistake, but that doesn't give you the right to belittle me or anyone else. I work hard, and I deserve respect, just like everyone else in this restaurant. The room fell silent. Gerald's eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment the tables around them shifted their focus to the confrontation. The old woman at the adjacent table leaned forward, her expression a mix of concern and admiration. You're crossing a line, Marcus, Tom warned gently, but Marcus felt the old woman's gaze urging him on. No, I'm done being quiet, Marcus said, his voice rising with quiet intensity. I'm sick of being treated like I'm less than human because of my job. I'm not a servant, I'm a person. Gerald's expression shifted from shock to anger, and he leaned forward, his face inches from Marcus's. You think you can talk to me like that? I could have you fired in an instant. Marcus felt the rush of fear but pushed it aside. You might have money, but you don't have the right to treat people like they're beneath you. I'm not afraid of losing my job if it means standing up for myself. Suddenly, the old woman at the adjacent table spoke up, her voice clear and authoritative. Excuse me, but I think you should listen to this young man. It takes courage to stand up for oneself, especially in the face of such entitlement. Gerald turned, his arrogance faltering for the first time. And who are you? He snapped. But the old woman remained calm, her eyes unwavering. I'm someone who has fought against discrimination my entire life, she said, her voice steady. I know what it's like to be dismissed and belittled. You may have the money and the power, but that doesn't make you a better person. The restaurant fell into a hushed silence, the tension palpable. Marcus felt a rush of gratitude towards the old woman, her words resonating deep within him. It was as if she had given voice to everything he had been feeling. Gerald's bravado began to crumble. He straightened up, feigning indifference, but Marcus could see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. You don't know what you're talking about, Gerald muttered, but the fire in his voice had dimmed. On the contrary, the old woman replied, her tone firm. I've seen too many people like you, hiding behind wealth and privilege, thinking it grants you the right to belittle others. It's time for you to learn some humility. Tom nodded, stepping in to solidify the moment. We are proud of our staff here, and Marcus is no exception. If you can't treat him with respect, then perhaps you should reconsider your place in this restaurant. Marcus felt the weight of the moment shift. The other patrons began to murmur in agreement, their support palpable. Gerald's friends exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. With the spotlight on him, Gerald's bravado finally waned. Fine, he huffed, pushing back from the table. I'll take my business elsewhere. He stood up, his face twisted in anger as he stormed out of the restaurant, his friends trailing behind, their laughter fading into the distance. Marcus exhaled, the tension in his shoulders releasing as the weight of the confrontation began to lift. You did great, Marcus, Tom said, clapping him on the back. The old woman smiled at him warmly. You were very brave, young man. It's not easy to stand up for yourself, especially against such ignorance. Thank you, Marcus replied, feeling the warmth of her praise wash over him. You should come see me after your shift, she continued, her eyes twinkling. I'd like to talk to you about your future. Sure, I'd like that, Marcus said, curiosity peaking within him. As the evening continued, the atmosphere in the restaurant shifted. Patrons spoke in hushed tones, sharing murmurs of approval for Marcus's courage. He moved through the dining room with renewed energy, serving tables and sharing smiles, his heart lighter than it had been all night. Finally, as the last of the patrons began to leave, Marcus found himself standing beside the old woman's table once more. I really appreciate your support tonight, he said, genuinely thankful. It meant a lot. Of course, she replied, her gaze steady. You deserve to be treated with respect. You have the spirit of a fighter, and I admire that. Marcus felt a warmth spread through him, the weight of the evening's ordeal slowly fading. What's your name? My name is Eleanor, she said, extending her hand, and I think you have a bright future ahead of you, Marcus. As they shook hands, Marcus felt a sense of hope blossoming within him. This night, which had begun with humiliation, was transforming into something unexpected, an opportunity for growth and change. The next day dawned bright and clear, but Marcus struggled to shake off the remnants of the previous night's confrontation. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene over and over in his mind. The thrill of standing up for himself battled against the anxiety of what might come next. Would Gerald retaliate? Would he lose his job at Rive Gauche? But there was also a spark of hope. Eleanor's offer to talk about his future lingered in his mind like a warm light in the darkness. She had seemed genuinely interested in helping him, and that thought alone was enough to coax him out of bed. After a quick shower, Marcus dressed in his best clothes, a crisp white shirt and black slacks. He wanted to make a good impression, not just for Eleanor, but for himself. He was tired of feeling small and invisible, tired of letting others dictate how he should feel about himself. As he made his way to the restaurant, the memory of Gerald's insults still stung, but he pushed them aside. It was time to focus on what lay ahead. The thought of culinary school ignited a fire within him, one he was determined to fan into a flame. When Marcus arrived at Rive Gauche, the atmosphere was bustling as usual. The clatter of dishes and the hum of conversation filled the air. But today an undercurrent of tension seemed to run through the staff. Whispers echoed through the kitchen about Gerald's threats to the management, and Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. He put on his apron and dove into the rhythm of the service, pushing aside his worries. The lunch crowd was different than the dinner rush, more casual but still demanding. He took orders, served drinks, and made small talk with regulars, all the while keeping an ear out for any news about the fallout from last night. Just as he was refilling a customer's water glass, Tom approached him, his expression serious. Hey, Marcus, can we talk for a second? Sure, Marcus replied, feeling the knot tighten further. Tom led him to a quieter corner of the restaurant, away from the hustle and bustle. I just wanted to give you a heads up. Gerald called earlier, and he's pretty upset about the way things went down last night. I figured as much, Marcus said, crossing his arms defensively. He's not the type to just let it go. Right. He's threatening to pull his funding from the restaurant, and he's been talking to some of our other major donors. Tom sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I'm worried that if he follows through, it could affect everyone's job, including yours. The words felt like a punch to the gut. Marcus's heart raced as he processed the implications. So what does that mean for me? I don't want you to feel like you can't speak your mind, Tom said, his voice steady. But we need to tread carefully. I'm counting on you to help keep the peace around here. Marcus nodded, feeling torn. He didn't want to be the cause of anyone losing their job, but he also couldn't go back to being a silent victim. I understand. I'll do my best. Tom clapped him on the shoulder, offering a reassuring smile. You're a good worker, Marcus. Just remember that standing up for yourself is important, but so is knowing when to pick your battles. As Tom walked away, Marcus's resolve deepened. He needed to find a way to balance his integrity with the reality of the situation. He couldn't let fear dictate his actions, but he also didn't want to throw himself into a fight he might not win. During the lunch shift, Marcus found himself distracted, his mind racing with thoughts of Eleanor and the conversation they would have later. He was determined to make the most of it, to explore the possibilities she might offer. After the lunch crowd thinned out, he spotted Eleanor sitting at a small table in the corner, her silver hair shimmering in the afternoon light. She appeared to be reading a book, but as soon as she noticed him, she closed it and smiled warmly. "Marcus, I'm glad you could make it," she said, gesturing for him to join her. "Thank you for inviting me," he replied, taking a seat across from her. "I wanted to talk to you about your aspirations," she said, her tone sincere. "You mentioned wanting to go to culinary school. What's holding you back?" Marcus hesitated, the weight of his dreams colliding with the practical realities of his situation. "Money, mostly. I'm working to pay off my student loans, and it feels like I'll never catch up." Eleanor nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I understand. It's a tough situation, but I believe in the importance of pursuing your passions. Have you thought about applying for scholarships?" "I've looked into it, but I haven't found anything that fits my situation," Marcus admitted. "I work so much that it's hard to find the time to apply." "Why don't we explore some options together?" Eleanor suggested. "I have connections in the culinary world, and I'd be happy to help you navigate the application process." Marcus felt a rush of hope at her words. "Really? You'd do that for me?" "Of course," she replied, her eyes shining with kindness. "You have a talent, Marcus. I can see it in the way you move through the kitchen. It would be a shame to let that go to waste." He leaned forward, excitement bubbling within him. "I've always wanted to open my own restaurant, one that highlights the flavors of my culture, the dishes I grew up with." Eleanor's smile widened. "That's wonderful. You should absolutely pursue that dream. And I can help you not just with the applications, but also with mentorship. I know several chefs and restaurant owners who'd be thrilled to meet someone with your passion." The possibilities began to swirl in Marcus's mind, a whirlwind of hope and ambition. He felt a renewed sense of determination, fueled by Eleanor's encouragement. "Thank you, Eleanor. This means a lot to me," he said, sincerity etched in his voice. "It's just the beginning, Marcus," she replied. "You have the potential to turn your dreams into reality, but it'll take hard work and resilience." They spent the next hour discussing his goals, with Eleanor sharing stories from her own journey. She had faced her share of struggles, but had always found a way to persevere. Marcus hung on to her every word, feeling invigorated by her wisdom and experience. As they wrapped up their conversation, Eleanor handed him a business card. "Call me anytime. We'll get started on those applications, and I'll introduce you to some people who can help." Marcus took the card, feeling a mix of gratitude and excitement. "I will. Thank you, truly." Just as they finished, the door swung open, and in walked Gerald, flanked by a group of his friends. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted instantly, a tension crackling in the air. Marcus's heart sank. He hadn't expected to see him so soon. "What's he doing here?" Eleanor asked, her voice low. Marcus glanced at Gerald, who was scanning the room with an air of entitlement. He could feel his heart racing, the weight of last night's confrontation hanging heavily in the air. "I don't know," Marcus replied, trying to keep his voice steady, "but I'm not looking forward to this." Eleanor nodded, her expression shifting to one of concern. "Just remember what we talked about. You have the power to choose how you respond." Marcus took a deep breath, steeling himself as Gerald approached their table, his friends trailing behind him. "Well, well, if it isn't the lowly waiter and his old friend," Gerald sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "What a lovely sight." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "What do you want, Gerald?" Gerald smirked, clearly enjoying the moment. "Just came to check on my favorite restaurant, but it looks like it's gone downhill since I last visited." Marcus felt the anger bubbling just beneath the surface, but he forced himself to remain calm. "I'm just trying to do my job, Gerald." "Your job? You mean your little fantasy of being a chef?" He shot back, laughter bubbling from his friends. "You really think you belong here?" Eleanor leaned forward, her tone firm. "You need to learn some respect, Gerald. You can't continue to bully people just because you think you have the upper hand." Gerald's expression faltered for a moment, surprise flashing across his face. "And who are you to lecture me?" he retorted, his bravado faltering slightly. Marcus felt the tide shifting, the energy in the room changing as more patrons began to pay attention. "I'm someone who has seen too many people like you hide behind wealth and privilege," Eleanor said, her voice steady and unwavering. "It's time for you to learn that money doesn't grant you the right to belittle others." Her words resonated deeply, and Marcus felt a surge of courage rising within him. "You're right, Eleanor," Marcus said, stepping forward. His heart raced, but he felt empowered by her support. "It's time someone called out your behavior, Gerald. You think you can come in here and act like you own the place, but the truth is, you're not above anyone else." Gerald's face darkened, and he opened his mouth to retort, but the old woman's words had struck a nerve. For a brief moment, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. His friends shifted uncomfortably behind him, glancing at each other as if gauging how far they wanted to follow Gerald down this path. "You'll regret this, Marcus," Gerald finally spat, his voice low and dangerous. "I have connections, and I won't let you ruin my reputation. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of establishment this is." "And what exactly is that?" Eleanor pressed, her tone unyielding. "A place where entitled bullies can harass hardworking individuals? That's not a reputation anyone wants." The tension in the restaurant was palpable. Patrons had turned their heads to witness the unfolding drama, their murmurs growing louder. Marcus felt the weight of their gazes on him, but this time it didn't overwhelm him, it bolstered him. "Look, Gerald," Marcus said, his voice steady, "this isn't about you or your money. It's about treating people with respect. You've spent too long hiding behind your privilege, thinking it gives you the right to belittle others." Gerald's bravado was faltering, and Marcus could see the anger boiling within him. "You think you can talk to me like that because you had one good night? You're nothing. You'll always be just a waiter." Marcus felt the sting of the insult, but he refused to let it take root. "And yet I'm standing here, speaking out against you while you hide behind your friends. That says a lot about your character." Just then, a voice from the back of the restaurant called out, "Hey, why don't you get out of here, Gerald? We don't need your negativity." It was a regular customer who often came in with his family, and the room erupted into a chorus of agreement. "Yeah, you don't belong here," another patron shouted, emboldened by the first. Marcus's heart raced as the tide turned. Gerald's face flushed, and he looked around, realizing that the room was no longer on his side. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, his bravado slipping away. "You'll regret this. I'll make sure of it." He turned to leave, pushing past the tables and storming out of the restaurant, his friends trailing behind him, their laughter now muted. As the door swung shut, a wave of relief washed over Marcus. The patrons erupted into applause, cheers filling the space as the tension dissolved. Marcus felt a surge of gratitude toward Eleanor, who had stood by him through it all. "That was incredible," she said, her eyes sparkling with pride. "You handled yourself beautifully." Marcus couldn't help but smile, the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. "I couldn't have done it without you. Your support made all the difference." "You had it in you all along," Eleanor replied, her tone encouraging. "It just took the right moment for you to find your voice." As the applause faded, Marcus felt a sense of camaraderie with the patrons around him. He realized that standing up for himself had not only empowered him, but also inspired others to join in. "Thank you all for your support," Marcus called out, raising his hands in appreciation. "It means more than you know." The crowd cheered again, and Marcus felt a warmth spread through him, a sense of belonging that had previously eluded him. Once the din of celebration quieted down, Marcus returned to his duties. He moved from table to table, refilling drinks and checking on customers, but this time with a renewed sense of confidence. He was no longer just a waiter. He was a person with dreams and goals, someone who deserved respect. As the lunch shift came to a close, Marcus found himself reflecting on the events of the day. The confrontation with Gerald had put him on an edge, but it had also opened doors he hadn't expected. He was beginning to understand that the world around him was not as rigid as he had thought. Later that evening, as the dinner crowd began to filter in, Marcus spotted Eleanor sitting at her usual table. She was engrossed in her book, a serene smile on her face. He felt a swell of gratitude as he approached her, eager to share the day's happenings. "Hey, Eleanor," Marcus said, a grin spreading across his face. "You won't believe what happened after you left." She looked up, her eyes bright with interest. "Do tell." Marcus recounted the support he had received from patrons after Gerald had stormed out, the way they had rallied around him. "I never expected that kind of response. It felt amazing." Eleanor nodded, her expression warm. "You see, people want to support those who stand up for themselves. You've inspired them." Just then Tom walked by, his expression gravely serious. "Marcus, can I see you for a moment?" His heart sank as he followed Tom to the back of the restaurant. "What's going on?" he asked, bracing himself for bad news. "Gerald called again," Tom said, his tone heavy. "He's threatening to go public with his complaints about the restaurant. He's trying to rally other patrons against us." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "What does that mean for us?" "It could mean trouble," Tom replied, his voice strained. "We could lose business, and that could affect everyone's jobs. I need you to be careful, Marcus." Marcus nodded, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "I understand. I'll do my best to keep things calm." As they returned to the main dining room, Marcus felt the tension in the air. The restaurant buzzed with activity, but beneath the surface, he sensed unease among the staff. He took a deep breath, reminding himself of Eleanor's words. He had found his voice once, and he would do whatever it took to protect his job and the people around him. Just as he was starting to regain his composure, he heard Gerald's voice once more, this time accompanied by a group of his friends. They had returned, and their energy was charged with confrontation. Marcus's heart raced as he prepared himself for another round. "Look who it is," Gerald sneered, his eyes locking onto Marcus. "The little waiter trying to play hero." "What do you want, Gerald?" Marcus replied, forcing himself to remain calm. "I want to make it clear that your actions have consequences," Gerald said, his voice dripping with malice. "You think you can just talk back to me and get away with it? You've put this place in jeopardy." The patrons around them began to murmur, sensing the tension rising once again. Marcus felt the pressure mounting, but he refused to back down. "I stood up for myself because it was the right thing to do," he replied, his voice steady. "If you're upset about it, that's your problem, not mine." "Is that so?" Gerald challenged, stepping closer, his friends fanning out behind him like a pack of wolves. "You think you're untouchable? You're just a waiter, and I can make your life hell." The atmosphere shifted, tension crackling as patrons turned to watch the confrontation unfold. "You're not going to intimidate me, Gerald," Marcus said, his heart pounding. "You've already shown your true colors, and I won't let you bully me or anyone else in this restaurant." Eleanor stood up from her table, her presence commanding attention. "Gerald, you need to leave. Your behavior is unacceptable, and the patrons here deserve better." Gerald's eyes flickered with anger, but the support from the onlookers began to chip away at his bravado. "You think you can just team up with the little waiter and get away with it?" he scoffed, but his voice lacked conviction. "This isn't just about Marcus," Eleanor replied, her tone unwavering. "It's about everyone who has ever faced discrimination or bullying, and it's time for you to learn that your actions have consequences." The room buzzed with agreement, the patrons rallying behind Eleanor and Marcus. Gerald's bravado began to crumble under the weight of their unity. "You're making a mistake," he spat, but the fire in his voice had dimmed. As he turned to leave, a voice from the back called out, "Good riddance!" The restaurant erupted in applause, and Marcus felt a swell of pride. He had stood his ground, and the community had rallied around him. Eleanor approached him, her eyes shining with admiration. "You did it again, Marcus. You found your voice, and you inspired others to do the same." Marcus felt a warmth spread through him, the support of those around him lifting his spirits. The aftermath of the confrontation with Gerald left a charged atmosphere in Rive Gauche. The restaurant buzzed with energy, but underneath the surface, uncertainty lingered. Marcus could feel it in the way the staff exchanged glances, the hushed conversations that stopped when he approached. He had stood up for himself, but Gerald's threats still loomed large, casting a shadow over the camaraderie that had blossomed in the wake of the incident. As Marcus prepared for the dinner shift, he replayed the events in his mind. He had never imagined himself taking a stand like that, but it felt exhilarating. He had gained the support of the patrons, and even more importantly, he had gained a sense of self-respect. But now he worried about the repercussions. Gerald was a powerful man, and Marcus knew that people like him didn't take kindly to challenges. When Marcus arrived at the restaurant that evening, the mood was tense. The usual buzz was subdued, and whispers floated through the air like a thick fog. Tom called for a staff meeting before the dinner shift, and Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. As the team gathered in the back, Tom's expression was grave. "I know things have been tense since the incident with Gerald," he began, "but I want to assure you all that we're doing everything we can to handle the situation." "What does that mean?" Carla asked, crossing her arms. "He's a major donor. We can't afford to lose his business." I understand that, Tom replied, his voice steady. But we also can't let him harass our staff or our customers. I've spoken with some of our regulars, and they're supportive of us. We're not alone in this. Marcus felt a flicker of hope at Tom's words, but the knot in his stomach tightened. What if he goes to the press? He asked, his voice rising with concern. What if he tries to ruin us? Tom sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. We're prepared for that possibility. We have a PR firm ready to help manage the situation if it escalates. But I need everyone to stay calm and focused. We can't give him the satisfaction of seeing us crumble. The meeting concluded with a sense of determination, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. As the dinner crowd began to filter in, he put on his best smile and dove into his duties, trying to keep the anxiety at bay. The night unfolded as it usually did, with Marcus moving from table to table, taking orders and serving food. But the tension in the air was palpable. He could feel Gerald's presence looming, even though the man hadn't returned to the restaurant since their last confrontation. Halfway through the shift, Marcus noticed a commotion near the entrance. A group of reporters had gathered outside, their cameras flashing as they spoke to patrons exiting the restaurant. His heart sank as he overheard snippets of conversation. "Have you heard about the incident last night?" one reporter asked. "What do you think about the way the restaurant handled it?" Marcus's stomach dropped. He exchanged worried glances with Carla, who stood behind the bar wiping down glasses. "This is bad," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're here for us." Tom emerged from the kitchen, his expression grim. "Everyone stay calm. I'm going to go out and talk to them," he said, his tone steady. Marcus watched as Tom approached the reporters, his back straight and confident. He admired Tom's commitment to protecting the restaurant and its staff. But as the minutes passed, the tension escalated. The reporters began to turn their attention to the patrons inside, asking questions and seeking quotes. Marcus felt a growing sense of dread as he watched the situation unfold. Just then, the door swung open, and Gerald stepped inside, flanked by a couple of his friends. The atmosphere shifted instantly, the energy in the room crackling with tension. Marcus felt his heart race as he braced for another confrontation. "What a surprise," Gerald sneered, his gaze sweeping over the restaurant. "I see you're still operating this dump." "What do you want, Gerald?" Marcus asked, forcing himself to remain calm despite the anger bubbling within him. "I came to see how things were going after my little visit yesterday," he replied, a smug grin spreading across his face. "I hope you're ready for the fallout." Marcus clenched his fists at his sides, trying to keep his composure. "You don't intimidate me," he said, his voice steady. "You're not going to scare us into submission." Gerald stepped closer, his friends hovering behind him like vultures. "This is going to end badly for you, Marcus. You think you're some kind of hero, but you're just a waiter who got lucky." "You're wrong about that," Marcus said, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "I'm more than just a waiter. I'm a person with dreams, and I won't let you bully me or anyone else here." The tension in the room thickened as patrons turned to watch the confrontation. Gerald's bravado began to falter, and he scanned the faces around him, realizing that the support for Marcus was palpable. "You think you've got the support of the people here?" Gerald scoffed, but his voice lacked conviction. "They'll turn on you the moment things get tough." "No, Gerald," Marcus replied, his voice firm. "We're standing together. You're the one who's outnumbered." Just then, Tom returned from speaking with the reporters, his expression grim. "Gerald, we don't want any trouble," he said, his tone calm but authoritative. "I suggest you leave." "Or what?" Gerald challenged, his eyes narrowing. "You'll call the cops? You think they'll take your side?" The room felt charged with anticipation, the tension vibrating in the air. Marcus could feel the weight of everyone's gaze on him, and he knew that this was a pivotal moment. "I think you should leave before you make things worse for yourself," Tom said, his voice steady. Gerald's expression twisted in anger, but he hesitated, the pressure of the situation weighing on him. The patrons around them began to murmur in agreement, their support for Marcus and Tom evident. "You're all going to regret this," Gerald spat, but the bravado in his voice was fading. "I'll make sure everyone knows how you treat your customers. And we'll make sure everyone knows how you treat your fellow human beings," Marcus shot back, feeling the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "You're nothing without your money and your threats." With a final glare, Gerald turned and stormed out of the restaurant, his friends trailing behind him. The door slammed shut, and the tension that had gripped the room began to dissipate. The patrons erupted into applause, clapping and cheering for Marcus and Tom. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him, gratitude flooding his heart. "You handled that like a pro," Tom said, clapping Marcus on the shoulder. "I couldn't have done it without your support," Marcus replied, his voice filled with gratitude. As the evening continued, the atmosphere in the restaurant shifted. The patrons were buzzing with excitement, and Marcus felt a sense of unity among them. It was as if they had all come together to stand against the tide of entitlement and disrespect. But even as the night unfolded, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this battle was far from over. He knew that Gerald would retaliate, and the thought gnawed at him. Later that evening, Eleanor returned to the restaurant, and Marcus felt a surge of relief at her presence. She approached him with a warm smile, her eyes filled with understanding. "I heard about the confrontation," she said, her voice steady. "You were incredible, Marcus. I'm proud of you for standing your ground." "Thank you, Eleanor," he replied, feeling grateful for her support. "But I'm worried about what Gerald will do next. He won't just let this go." "You're right," she said, her expression serious. "But you have a community behind you now. You're not alone in this fight." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had found his voice, and he was determined to use it. As the night wore on, the restaurant buzzed with excitement, but Marcus could sense an undercurrent of anxiety lingering in the air. He knew that the struggle was far from over, and he was prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the last of the patrons left, Marcus felt a sense of purpose settling over him. The fight against entitlement and discrimination was just beginning, and he was ready to take it on. With Eleanor's support and the community behind him, he felt empowered to face whatever Gerald or anyone else might throw his way. In the days that followed, the tension in the restaurant continued to bubble beneath the surface. Marcus remained vigilant, determined to protect the newfound sense of unity among the staff and patrons. He worked harder than ever, pushing through the challenges with a sense of purpose. The support from the community fueled his resolve, and he found himself growing more confident with each passing day. Days turned into weeks, and the tension at Rive Gauche hung like a storm cloud, threatening to burst at any moment. While Gerald had retreated following the confrontation, Marcus knew it was only a matter of time before he would strike back. The management had fortified their defenses, calling in their PR firm to help navigate the fallout, but the uncertainty remained palpable. The first weekend after the incident, the restaurant was abuzz with activity. Patrons were eager to support Rive Gauche, and a sense of solidarity filled the air. Marcus felt the camaraderie grow stronger with every shift, his fellow staff members rallying around each other as they faced the challenges posed by Gerald's threats. One evening, as Marcus was serving a table of regulars, he overheard a conversation that made his heart race. "Did you hear about it? Gerald's been talking to the press. He wants to smear the restaurant's reputation," a woman at another table said, her voice low but strained with concern. Marcus's stomach dropped. He exchanged a worried glance with Carla, who was pouring wine at the bar. She looked equally troubled. They both knew that if Gerald succeeded in turning the narrative against them, it could jeopardize everything they had worked for. Later that night, as the dinner crowd began to thin, Marcus found himself in the kitchen, helping Carla clean up. "Have you heard anything more about what Gerald is planning?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Carla sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. "No, just rumors, but it sounds like he's trying to convince some of our regulars to jump ship. He's a petty man." Marcus felt a wave of frustration wash over him. "It's not just about the restaurant, it's about standing up to people like him. He thinks he can bully us into submission, but we can't let him win." "You're right," Carla replied, her eyes brightening with determination. "We've got to show him that we won't back down. The community is behind us." As the week progressed, the tension began to escalate. Tom called for another staff meeting, and Marcus could feel a sense of urgency in the air. They gathered in the back, and Tom's expression was serious. "I've been in touch with the PR firm, and they've advised us to prepare for a potential media storm," Tom said, pacing the room. "Gerald is set to speak out publicly, and we need to have our message clear. We can't let him control the narrative." Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach as Tom outlined their strategy. They would focus on their commitment to community, respect, and the values that guided Rive Gauche. It was a solid plan, but Marcus knew that words alone wouldn't be enough. They needed action. "What if we organized a community event?" Marcus suggested, his mind racing with ideas. We could invite our regulars, local businesses, and even some chefs to showcase what we stand for. It would show that we're united and that we're not afraid to stand up for ourselves. Tom's eyes widened with interest. That's actually a great idea, Marcus. A community evening could bring people together and reinforce our commitment to inclusivity. The room buzzed with excitement as the staff discussed the logistics of the event. They planned a night filled with food, music, and speeches from local chefs and community leaders, all focused on celebrating diversity and unity. It was a bold move, but Marcus felt invigorated by the idea. As the day of the event approached, Marcus worked tirelessly to prepare. He collaborated with Carla and the kitchen staff to create a special menu featuring dishes inspired by the diverse cultures within the community. He wanted to showcase the flavors that had shaped his life, blending them together in a way that told a story of resilience and hope. On the night of the event, Rive Gauche was transformed. Colorful decorations adorned the walls, and the atmosphere buzzed with excitement. Patrons filled the restaurant, laughter and conversation filling the air. The community had come together in support, and Marcus felt a swell of pride as he looked around. As the evening unfolded, local chefs shared their stories, highlighting the struggles they faced and the importance of community support. When it was Marcus's turn to speak, he felt a mix of nerves and anticipation. He had a message to share, one that he hoped would resonate with everyone in the room. Taking a deep breath, he stepped up to the microphone. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, feeling the warmth of their support. "This event is about more than just food. It's about unity, respect, and standing up for one another. We've faced challenges, but together we can create a community that celebrates diversity and lifts each other up." The crowd erupted in applause, and Marcus felt a surge of energy. He continued, "I've learned that it's not just about being a waiter or a chef. It's about being a person who deserves respect. We all have dreams, and we can't let anyone, no matter how powerful, diminish those dreams." As he spoke, he caught sight of Eleanor in the crowd, her smile encouraging him to keep going. "Thank you for supporting us, for believing in us. Together, we can show that kindness and respect matter more than money or privilege." The crowd cheered, and Marcus felt a wave of hope wash over him. The event was a success, and the energy in the room was palpable. People mingled, shared stories, and celebrated the spirit of community that had brought them together. Just as the evening was winding down, Marcus spotted a familiar face in the crowd, Gerald's. His heart raced as he watched the man enter the restaurant, flanked by a couple of his friends. He could feel the tension in the air shift, a wave of uncertainty washing over the room. "What's he doing here?" Carla whispered, her voice laced with concern. "I don't know, Bastis," Marcus replied, feeling a mix of anger and apprehension. Gerald scanned the room, a smug expression on his face as he approached the bar. "I see you all decided to throw a little party without me," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "This is a community event, Gerald," Tom said, stepping forward to confront him. "If you're here to cause trouble, I suggest you leave." "Oh, please," Gerald scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "You think this little gathering will change anything? You're all just a bunch of nobodies." The room fell silent, tension thickening as everyone turned to watch the confrontation. Marcus felt his heart race, the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. "You're the nobody here, Gerald," he said, stepping forward to face him. "You're hiding behind your money and your threats, but we're standing together. We won't let you bully us." Gerald's expression shifted, surprise flashing in his eyes. "You think you can talk to me like that? You're nothing but a waiter." "And you're nothing without your privilege," Marcus shot back. "You can't belittle me or anyone else here. We're a community, and we support each other." Just then, Eleanor stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. "Gerald, you need to understand something. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about everyone who has ever faced discrimination or bullying. You're not welcome here if you can't respect that." The crowd began to murmur in agreement, rallying around Marcus and Eleanor. Gerald's bravado faltered as he realized he was outnumbered and outmatched. "I won't be treated like this," he spat, his voice trembling with anger. "Then leave," Tom said firmly. "You're not welcome here." With a final glare, Gerald turned and stormed out of the restaurant, his friends trailing behind him. The tension in the room dissipated, and the crowd erupted into applause, cheers ringing out for Marcus and Eleanor. In that moment, Marcus felt a rush of triumph. They had faced down the fear, and their community had stood strong. As the night wrapped up, Marcus found himself reflecting on how far he had come. The journey had been difficult, filled with challenges, fears, and moments of doubt, but he had found his voice. He had fought for himself and for those around him, and it had made all the difference. Later, as he cleaned up the restaurant, Eleanor approached him once again. "You were incredible tonight, Marcus," she said, her eyes shining with pride. "You've really stepped into your power." "Thank you, Eleanor," he replied, feeling a swell of gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without your support." "You had it in you all along," she said, her voice warm. "Just remember that you can continue to make a difference, not just for yourself, but for others as well." As he finished cleaning up, Marcus felt a sense of hope blossoming within him. He was ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that he had a community behind him, ready to support him. With the restaurant finally quieting down, Marcus stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The night sky sparkled with stars, and he felt a sense of peace envelop him. He had faced his fears, stood up to a bully, and found his voice. He was no longer just a waiter. He was a person with dreams, and he was determined to build a future that honored those dreams. As he looked up at the stars, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. With the support of his community and the lessons he had learned, he was ready to embrace whatever came next. In that moment, he understood that standing up for himself was just the beginning. It was about creating a world where everyone could feel respected and heard. You've made it to the end. If you enjoyed this story, I am confident that you'll love the next one appearing on the screen now. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and please give this video a like. I'll see you in the next one.